The Polish orphans' journey during World War II is a story of extraordinary courage and resilience, told through the eyes of forgotten civilians who faced unimaginable hardships while seeking freedom. It began with innocent lives abruptly torn from their peaceful existence, thrust into a world racked by conflict and danger. Imagine the cold, biting air of a Siberian winter as it seeps into the bones of a young child, the distant echo of gunfire blending with the crackling of a hurried campfire, and the ghostly footsteps of soldiers carrying away families in the silent early morning. This is the world of Danuta Matska, a schoolgirl who, like thousands, was forced into exile by war she never chose but had to endure. If stories like this move you as deeply as they move me, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. These forgotten stories deserve to live again, and your voice helps make that happen. Before the storm clouds of war darkened their skies, these children were just that, children. Danuta and thousands like her dreamed simple dreams, played in the fields of eastern Poland, and lived lives carved out of routine and love. Their mothers were farmers, their fathers workers, their grandparents guardians of history and tradition. But when the Soviet forces invaded Poland in September 1939, everything changed in an instant. They were uprooted, labeled as enemies, and cast into a merciless expanse of Siberia's frozen tundra. Families were shattered, possessions lost to cold earth and desolation, and children orphaned in the harshest of ways. This was not a war waged by soldiers on front lines alone. It was a war against innocence. As the war's machinery rumbled forward, the Polish orphans found themselves imprisoned in labor camps scattered across the Soviet Union. The landscape was brutal: frozen forests, barren fields, and the constant threat of starvation. The sound of hurried whispers and tears mixed with the crackle of burning wood for warmth. Their days were punctuated by forced labor and nights by cold, trembling hands, clutching the thin shreds of hope. Yet, amid these conditions, a glimmer of salvation appeared when in July 1941, after the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, an agreement was reached to release thousands of Polish civilians, among them these orphaned children. The survival journey became a treacherous migration southward, through Kazakhstan's scorching deserts and the vast steppes to Iran. Many traveled by train in overcrowded cattle cars, while others trudged on foot, selling the last of their possessions to fund escape. Fear was constant, fear of discovery, hunger, exhaustion, and the unknown. These children had no weapons, no rank to protect them. They were simply ghosts moving through a world ablaze with political upheaval and violence. Yet within this crucible, they showed an unexpected courage. They carried each other through moments of despair and uncertainty. They hid in shadows, helped strangers, and pushed forward against all odds. This exodus was not the end, but a prelude to another chapter. The British government facilitated the transport of thousands of these refugees to East African territories, including Tanganyika, now Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and northern and southern Rhodesia, now Zambia and Zimbabwe. Here, in the heart of Africa, these orphans faced yet another trial: the alien heat, strange landscapes, and the heavy burden of longing for home. Refugee camps sprang up, creating small Polish enclaves far from war-torn Europe. Life in camps such as Tengaru was filled with resilience, where Polish flags flew high and the white eagle symbol reminded them of their roots. Yet the pain of displacement lingered. The war was far from over, and many had lost their families forever. The turning point came amid escalating tensions and unexpected dangers. Enemy patrols, diseases, and the constant threat of betrayal hung over the refugees like a dark cloud. Every moment held the possibility that their fragile community might be torn apart again. For the children especially, the silence before each potential discovery was deafening, their fate balanced on a knife's edge. Yet amidst these fears, acts of kindness and bravery shone brightest. Neighbors shared scarce food, caretakers guarded their charges against despair, and the children held on to their dreams of freedom with unwavering hope. What followed from their courage was more than survival. It was transformation. Some orphans became caretakers, others messengers of hope to scattered Polish exiles, and many helped preserve the cultural spirit of their homeland far from its soil. Their resilience inspired communities around them, changing perceptions and making an indelible mark on the history of refugees during World War II. This was courage without weapons, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Sadly, many of their stories were lost to time, buried under the weight of silence, shame, and the chaos of war. Documents were destroyed, memories faded, and fear of retaliation kept many from speaking out. Yet decades later, these stories have been rediscovered by historians, archivists, and descendants who have unearthed letters, photographs, and eyewitness accounts. These rediscoveries serve as powerful reminders that the smallest acts of bravery and kindness in the darkest times have shaped history in profound ways. Reflecting on this extraordinary journey reminds us of the profound humanity that persists amid incomprehensible suffering. These children, thrust into unimaginable hardship, chose courage over despair. Their journey across continents and their survival in exile highlight the essential truth that courage is not defined by weapons or rank, but by the unyielding will to protect, to hope, and to love. In our modern world, their story calls us to honor the forgotten and to recognize that even the smallest acts can change lives forever. This is a story of voices lost but not silenced, of shadows that have finally found light. The Polish orphans who crossed Siberia and Africa to reach freedom hold within them a testament to the enduring power of human spirit amidst the horrors of war. Their journey is a sacred reminder that every forgotten person shaped the world we inherit today. The cold winter morning of February 10th, 1940, crept silently over the small village of Lubomirka in eastern Poland. A grey mist hung heavy in the air, swallowing the feeble light of dawn. The frost cracked beneath the heavy boots of Russian soldiers arriving without warning. Among the trembling figures huddled inside a modest wooden farmhouse was Danuta Matska, a girl of just 11 years. Her breath came in ragged clouds, visible in the icy air, mingling with the acrid scent of burning wood from the stove. Outside, the wind howled through the barren trees as if mourning all that was about to be lost. Danuta's mother hastily gathered a few belongings, her hands shaking uncontrollably. A quiet whimper escaped the corner where Danuta's small dog lay, watching the hurried preparations with wide, confused eyes. There was no time for goodbyes. The war had reached even here, and for these innocents it brought exile, fear, and unimaginable hardship. If stories like this move you as deeply as they move me, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. These forgotten stories deserve to live again, and your voice helps make that happen. Before the war stole their childhoods, Danuta and thousands like her were ordinary children of peaceful villages, living simple and joyful lives rooted in nature, family, and hope. She would rise with the dawn, enjoying the cold but quiet mornings where dew still clung to the fields and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. Her days were punctuated by studying in a small wooden schoolhouse, playing alongside her brother and helping her mother with chores. Her dreams were humble, a future where her family would prosper, where the war whispers heard from far-off places would never reach them. Like many children in Poland's eastern provinces, she belonged to a tight-knit community where tradition, faith, and familial bonds wove a comforting fabric against the unknown. But peace was a fragile veil, torn violently aside. On September 17, 1939, the Soviet army, following the secret clauses of a brutal pact with Nazi Germany, crossed into eastern Poland, shattering everything. The people, farmers, children, widows, workers, were rounded up, separating families in their wake. Danuta's village was among the first to awaken to the terrifying reality that their lives had been permanently altered. Their passports stripped, their identities erased. They were designated enemies of the state and forcibly deported in cattle cars bound for Siberia's frozen wastelands. Days turned into weeks as the engines clattered through unforgiving landscapes where the deafening silence was broken only by the intermittent sobbing of children separated from their parents and the creaking of the train rattling over ice-crusted rails. This first phase of their ordeal was brutal and dehumanizing. The young and the old alike endured frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion in labor camps so remote that hope seemed as distant as the horizon. For many orphans like Danuta, the warmth of a family was replaced by a harsh struggle to stay alive, often relying on the kindness of strangers within the camps. Despite these conditions, a resilient spirit pulsed beneath the surface of despair. The children clung to each other, sharing stories, songs, and scraps of comfort, finding within themselves a new family, bound not by blood, but by the shared will to survive. In an extraordinary twist of fate, 1941 brought an unexpected glimmer of hope. The German invasion of the Soviet Union altered political alliances dramatically. The Polish government in exile, based in London, brokered an agreement with Stalin's regime known as the Sikorsky-Maysky Agreement, which led to the release of thousands of Polish civilians from the camps. Alongside the formation of the Anders Army, a Polish military force fighting alongside the Allies, these freed civilians, including many orphaned children, began an arduous exodus southwards through the Soviet republics toward Iran. Then, under British control, the journey was an odyssey of contrasting extremes. From the freezing Siberian landscapes to the scorching deserts of Persia, the orphans faced hunger, disease, and uncertainty. Many times they rode overcrowded trains or trudged through barren territory, carrying only the clothes on their backs and fading memories of home. Upon reaching Iran, they entered a liminal space, a momentary sanctuary in the chaos, where international aid organizations tried to provide food, shelter, and medical care. Yet Iran was only a waypoint. The British Empire, overseeing vast territories in East Africa, arranged for the evacuation of these vulnerable refugees to safer lands far removed from the theatre of war. In 1942 and 1943, ships carried nearly 18,000 Polish refugees, including many children, to British colonies in East Africa. Refugee settlements dotted the landscapes of Uganda, Kenya, Tanganyika, modern Tanzania, northern and southern Rhodesia, now Zambia and Zimbabwe, and South Africa. One of the most poignant chapters unfolded in the South African town of Oudtshoorn. There, a Polish children's home was established to shelter about 500 orphans who had survived the long journey. The camp, known as Dom Polskich Dzieci, became a world far removed from their birthplaces. Under the relentless African sun, the children adjusted to a new rhythm of life. Schooling resumed, Polish culture was preserved through language and tradition, and the longing for families lost and lands left behind was transformed into a collective hope for a better future. The camp was more than shelter. It was a symbol of survival, community, and resilience. The children worked to maintain the camp itself, reproduced Polish textbooks, and attended lessons under teachers who had escaped the war. They learned of their fathers fighting with the Polish Second Corps in battles far away, including the famous victory at Monte Cassino in Italy, which instilled pride and renewed hope among the young refugees. Life in these refugee camps was far from idyllic. The children battled homesickness, the ever-present shadow of war, and the threat of disease. Medical personnel and caretakers worked tirelessly to protect the fragile lives under their watch. Yet within these hardships bloomed unexpected acts of kindness and bravery. Scouts taught survival skills, friendships between children of different backgrounds formed, and every small success was celebrated as a victory against despair. The political realities continued to shape their fate. The Yalta Conference of 1945 sealed Poland's post-war fate under Soviet influence, dashing hopes of returning home. For many orphans, South Africa and other African settlements became permanent homes, prompting difficult choices between memory and survival. Some went on to new countries, others assimilated into local society, but the scars of war and exile remained. Decades later, the stories of these children, once buried beneath geopolitical turmoil and silence, have been uncovered by historians, descendants, and archivists. Personal diaries, letters, photographs, and first-hand testimonies have been pieced together to reveal a collective narrative of endurance and humanity. Museums in South Africa, exhibitions worldwide, and memorials have begun to honor the resilience of the Polish orphans who crossed continents in search of safety. These stories resonate deeply today. They remind us that courage is not measured by weapons or rank, but by the resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. They speak of children who lost everything but found hope in shared struggle, who navigated alien lands with trembling hands and unbroken spirits. Their odyssey across Siberia and Africa is a testament to human endurance, a powerful lesson that even in the bleakest darkness, the light of compassion and courage can shine. This is not just history. It is a sacred memory of forgotten civilians who shaped the course of war and peace through unrecorded acts of kindness and survival. As we reflect on their journey, the Polish orphans call us to recognize that behind every number in history lies a face, a story, and an enduring spark of humanity. The story of the Polish orphans who journeyed from the frozen reaches of Siberia to the sun-baked plains of Africa during World War II is one of courage, endurance, and survival against overwhelming odds. On March 6, 1943, a quiet corner of South Africa's Western Cape, the town of Oudtshoorn, became an unexpected refuge for 500 of these children who had escaped the horrors of war and the harsh Soviet camps. These children, many of them Jewish, were part of a larger group of roughly 18,000 Polish refugees sent to British colonies in East and Southern Africa. After months of imprisonment and forced deportations by Soviet authorities, their release came through the Sikorsky-Maisky Agreement in 1941, which allowed thousands of Polish civilians to leave Soviet labor camps and make their way to Iran. From there, British ships transported them to refugee settlements scattered across the continent, including Uganda, Kenya, Tanganyika, now Tanzania, Rhodesia, now Zambia and Zimbabwe, and South Africa. The camp in Oudtshoorn was more than just a shelter. It was a sanctuary in a strange land where the children found a semblance of normalcy amid chaos. The camp, located on the site of what is now South Africa's Infantry School Army Base, was managed under the supervision of South African social welfare officials alongside Polish consular representatives. Here, the orphans received care, education, and a community. Polish schools were established, and cultural and religious life was preserved with churches, community centers, and even scouting groups that nurtured the spirit and resilience of the children. Despite the trauma of their uprooting, homesickness, and awareness of the war raging in Europe, the children at Oudtshoorn learned to adapt to their new surroundings. The heat of the Karoo sun replaced the Siberian cold, and the open plains became their new playgrounds. Medical personnel, teachers, and caretakers worked tirelessly to provide not just survival, but hope. The children heard stories of the Polish Second Corps fighting bravely in Italy and dreamed of a future where Poland might be free again. However, their journey was marked by uncertainty. Plans to repatriate them to Poland after the war faltered as the Yalta Conference imposed Soviet influence over their homeland. Many realized that returning to Poland would mean facing communist rule or persecution. Consequently, many orphans assimilated into South African society or sought new lives abroad, their connection to their Polish roots maintained through memory and community efforts. Similar refugee camps thrived elsewhere in Africa, such as the Tengaru camp in Tanganyika, home to thousands of Polish displaced persons. There, children and families rebuilt lives, keeping Polish traditions alive through schooling, churches, and social organizations. Across Uganda, Kenya, and Rhodesia, over 19 camps provided refuge, each reflecting a microcosm of Polish cultural resilience far from the battlegrounds of Europe. These communities were witnesses to the endurance of human spirit amidst displacement and loss. The refugees faced challenges of disease, isolation, and cultural dislocation, yet formed bonds that transcended adversity. Decades later, historians and descendants have uncovered archives, testimonies, and artifacts that tell the story of this extraordinary migration. The Polish orphans' journey from Siberia's gulags to African refugee camps illuminates not only the horrors of war, but also the unexpected places hope and humanity can endure. These children, weak and vulnerable, became symbols of courage without weapons, reminders that even in history's darkest chapters, ordinary people shaped the course of humanity through acts of bravery, compassion, and resilience. This story invites us to remember the forgotten faces behind the statistics, honoring those whose extraordinary journeys went unrecorded in history books, but echo in the collective memory of survival and courage. In April 1943, after an arduous journey that spanned months and continents, a ship arrived at the bustling port of Port Elizabeth in the Union of South Africa. On board were 500 Polish children, survivors of deportation, war and upheaval, now stepping onto foreign soil for the first time in what was hoped to be a new chapter of safety and healing. They were swiftly transported to Oudtshoorn, a quiet town in the sun-drenched Karoo region, far removed from their war-torn homeland. At Oudtshoorn, the British and South African governments, with the Polish government in exile's cooperation, organized the Polish Children's Home, Dom Polskich Dzieci, a refuge and educational center designed to care for the orphans. The camp operated under the supervision of the South African Department of Social Welfare, alongside Polish consular representatives, offering a structure to restore some semblance of normal life. The children, many of whom bore the scars of famine, trauma, and loss, were welcomed warmly by the local Oudtshoorn community, who donated clothing, supplies, and kindness. Life at the orphanage was structured yet nurturing. The children attended Polish schools, where teachers ensured their education continued despite the upheaval. Copies of Polish textbooks were painstakingly reproduced to preserve language and culture, while religious and cultural activities anchored a sense of identity. The children formed choirs and dance groups, which became symbols of their resilience and heritage, performing throughout the community and beyond. Despite the warmth of their new home, the orphans carried deep wounds of separation and fear. Letters and photographs from relatives back in Europe were treasured, and the shadow of the ongoing war loomed large. News reached them that some fathers served honorably in the Polish forces, fighting battles such as Monte Cassino, instilling pride and hope among the children. Yet uncertainty persisted about the post-war future. The Yalta Conference of 1945, in which the fate of Poland was effectively sealed under Soviet influence, dashed hopes of many orphans returning home. Instead, a gradual decision emerged to assimilate these children into South African society. Girls were sent to convent schools, boys to technical institutions, and many settled permanently in South Africa, leaving a lasting legacy. Some went on to achieve remarkable success in their fields. Engineers Leonard Riniewicz and Mark Masoyasia, for example, contributed significantly to infrastructure projects such as the new Durban Harbour passenger terminal. Post-war, the Polish Children's Home at Oudtshoorn remained active until 1947. Over time, orphans reunited with extended family or relocated worldwide. But many chose to remain, maintaining vibrant Polish South African communities known affectionately as Oudtshoorniacy. These descendants continue to honor their heritage and the extraordinary journey of their ancestors through annual reunions and cultural preservation efforts. This history reminds us that war's toll is borne not only by soldiers, but profoundly by innocent civilians. The orphans of Poland represent a poignant testament to human endurance, a bridge across continents and cultures, forged in the crucible of suffering, yet blossoming into a story of survival, identity, and hope.